Good morning and welcome to First and Future Live. This is a bi-weekly program from the Institute for Emerging Issues at NC State University. Thank you. By Facebook Live, by LinkedIn, by YouTube, or listening to or watching a taped version on our YouTube channel or on our website. You can always find these webinars on our website at emergingissues.org under media. We really appreciate your joining us for these programs and look forward to your questions and comments as we move forward on the show. I'm Leslie Boney, the director of the Institute for Emerging Issues, and each week on this program, we try to focus on big problems that are facing the state, big opportunities that the state has. And we look at the programs and policies and people that are trying to address those challenges. And today we talk about a good problem, but also a tricky one. And that is that pandemic relief is coming. Pandemic relief has come. Pandemic relief will be here in the future in the form of billions of dollars from the federal government. The question is, how do we use it wisely to make sure that we make a full recovery from the pandemic and possibly even come back stronger than we were before the pandemic? Our guests today are people who are up to their necks right now and trying to figure that out. Representative Dean Arp, a member of the House of Representatives from Union County. Kevin Leonard, the Executive Director of the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners, and Paige Worsham, Associate General Counsel for the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners. Thanks to you all for being with us. I know this is a busy time.
Good to be here.
Thanks, Leslie, for having us.
Especially appreciate you guys getting up early this morning because I know the Senate budget came out last night. It's, 650 pages or so, and people have been trying to figure out what's in it over the past few hours. We'll talk a little bit about that, but mostly today we're focused on this windfall from the federal government that's going over and above what the state has to work with in terms of a budget for this year. And I really wanted to start by just showing a few slides that give a sense of the volume of funding that's coming down through the American Rescue Plan, or ARP, not to be confused with Representative ARP. The Coronavirus State and Local Fiscal Recovery Fund is bringing to North Carolina some $5.4 billion that will come directly to the state, and the state has to figure out what to do with that funding. Then there's a little over $2 billion that's coming directly to counties. They have to figure out what to do with that funding. Then there's another $1.3 billion that's coming to municipalities in the state. They have to figure out what to do with that funding. But that's not all. You can take a look at additional funding that's coming down. And this is absolutely not a complete list. There's funding coming for public health, for food assistance, for economic impact payments, those stimulus checks, unemployment benefits, small business assistance, rental and utility assistance, and education funding. About $3.6 billion is coming directly to public schools in North Carolina. But that's not all either. In addition to that, there is still pending discussion about what the infrastructure bill will look like. And depending on what day it is, the gap between the president and the Congress is somewhere around $800 billion or so. So president's bill currently sized at about $1.7 trillion. The current congressional offer, I think, is $928 billion. But regardless, it's a lot of money that's going to be coming down to supplement the funds that we just looked at. In addition to that, in addition to all those other funds we've seen, there is an emergency broadband benefit and an emerging connectivity plan that is designed to put dollars into the hands of people who can then use it to buy down the cost of broadband or possibly purchase a computer. So there's a lot of money, I think, is the easy summary that is coming to the state. And the worst case scenario is that none of this money is coordinated. The best case is that all of it is coordinated in a meaningful way and results in a North Carolina that comes out of the back end of this in a much better place. So Representative Arp, you said you wanted a breather before we started, but I'm not going to give it to you. You've got to now figure out what to do with all this state money. in addition to a state budget that has, we're coming into the year with a $6.5 billion surplus. Senate President Pro Tem Phil Berger described the Senate budget that came out yesterday as something that would accomplish two things. It would cut taxes and it would secure the state's post-pandemic future. So normally government functions from a little bit of a feeling of scarcity. It doesn't feel like scarcity right now. It feels like more something that government's got a lot of tough decisions to make. And I'm wondering how you're sorting through that and what your philosophy is as you look at all these different funding sources and try to imagine what we need most.
Great lead in for sure. I will tell you that we have to be careful and keep track of what the nature of the money and the revenue sources are, because we have a lot of one-time money in the source of the federal government support, the ARP, the CARES, all of that. Even the surplus that we have is one-time money. Our year-over-year revenue are the things that sustain salaries and ongoing programs and plans. And so we have to be extremely careful to not confuse the two, because you can really have some flawed budget practices that you do. And we will go forward with that. The stuff that's in the Senate are reflective of it. And so when you look at the total investment in education and all of these different programs across the board, you have to also assume or include the additional support that's coming in. I think it is transformational. And the key of this whole program today is how do we integrate and leverage that for a synergistic effect and really move North Carolina forward.
I wanted to show just a few areas where that potential synergy could come forward. And the governor had some ideas in his initial proposals for how broadband funding would be used. And they fell into these categories broadly. For broadband infrastructure, which I know is a personal passion of yours and something you've been working on for a long time, for waste and wastewater, for affordable housing and rehabilitation, downtown transformation, and essentially economic development purposes. So those are some of the categories where it's going to be really important to make sure that state and county and municipal and other funding is coordinated. Maybe could you start off with broadband? You've been a longtime advocate for and one of the leaders on what's called the GREAT program. And as part of a bill you've proposed, House Bill 947 this time, you're also proposing an additional wrinkle to that gives local government some ability to make some decisions about completing access to broadband, or a CAB program. So how can we best coordinate this broadband money to make a difference?
Absolutely. I mean, the first two there are ones that I've been tasked with on the senior appropriations chair to really work on both the broadband and water and wastewater. We're hip deep in that, trying to do that. The very nature of our broadband plan is to combine resources. The counties and the municipalities received a tremendous infusion from the federal government, as well as what the state did. And what we tried to do was craft the plan under the GREAT grant program that's been wildly successful on how we can leverage the county dollars and the municipal dollars, particularly their funds that are available, and incentivize that with the state resources to have a comprehensive plan that extends broadband quickly to every part of the state. And that's where we have two components. The traditional GREAT grant is a provider-led initiative that partners with local communities and so forth, as well as the state, to extend lines that they have already and to areas that are unserved and underserved, that don't have broadband coverage. We added to that this completing access to broadband. Kevin and county associations, we've gone over that, tried go to explain what that is. And what it does is this effort under the CAB is what we're calling it, is a county-led initiative where the county puts out requests for proposals. And the state partners with them and provides a significant matching grant to the counties when they put up within this plan their money and partners with a provider, again, to extend coverage of broadband into areas that are unserved and underserved. And so both of these effects are targeting those areas. On top of that, we have the federal's RDOF program, and they are fully funding those areas of North Carolina. And so we are staying out of those areas and focusing on other areas that are not served by the RDOF program. And so it's a very comprehensive, very important plan to not overstep into each of these so that we can maximize the amount of dollars on target, if you will.
I remember asking a state senator a few years ago why wastewater was so important. And he said, well, if you can't flush, you can't dance. But obviously, waste and wastewater infrastructure is something that's been lagging for a while, and there's been a need for a major infusion to solve both water and wastewater challenges. What can be done with this stimulus money that can synergize this state and local available funding and really make a difference?
Well, it's interesting. Most of the relief that has come to us from the feds have been to help in the additional cost in dealing with the pandemic environment. In other words, testing, masks, things of that nature. This really broadens the scope of money that's coming to us and available to us. I go back as far as the Connect NC bond program, where we had water and sewer infused as a part of that bond process into resources that are available to local communities in the source of grants and loans, zero loan programs that are available to extend water and sewer. This has been an ongoing problem and almost one of the number one requests for communities. And I would categorize them in two different realms. One are those distress systems, those systems that are having significant troubles and struggles right now, that because they cannot invest to sustain the needed upgrades and repairs and ongoing processes. And we have a gradation of systems that fall into what we call distressed categories. And then you have another whole category that are properly running and not distressed and are looking, in fact, to expand, and they're doing things right. And what you do in both cases are significantly different. And so water and wastewater help from the state I think will focus and coalesce around those two different scenarios. And the solution are not necessarily the same, although money is a significant piece of that. And that's kind of the bigger picture on water and wastewater.
All right, thank you. Kevin, a lot to react to there, but I wonder if maybe you could just take a step back and put us, to the extent you can, into the head of a county commissioner or a county manager who is watching the news and is seeing this funding arrive. I think half of the stimulus money arrived in May, another half's going to arrive next May. What are they seeing right now, and how does that fit given that they're just emerging from what's been a really difficult year?
Well, Leslie, the word that comes to my mind when you ask that question is overwhelmed. And I'm probably speaking for all of us, feeling a little overwhelmed coming out of this year, but overwhelmed and probably optimistic, I would say, because there is significant optimism and potential here. I will take a step back, and Leslie, I really appreciate you having us on your show, Paige and I. I will try to give a high level overview sort of thoughts, and Paige is really armed with a lot of data. And I will try to also react to Representative Arp's vision there, because we have been talking with Representative Arp since the ARP. And yes, sorry for the confusion on that. I'm sure you've had no fun with that, right? Came out about how to coordinate some of this. But to back up a step, if you think about the CARES Act money that came down to do what you just talked about, and that was respond, so react to the pandemic, that was a significant amount of influx of economic stimulus from Congress just to help out our public health efforts and to make sure that we were being able to react to the pandemic and the DSS efforts. And so this ARP money that's coming down, I sort of characterize as now proactive. And then you're talking about a potential infrastructure package coming out of Congress, which is still iffy. But I would characterize that as, if we get the ARP plan correct, we will have the mechanism to insert those dollars into an infrastructure plan moving forward. And that's what Representative Arp and other state leaders are talking about right now. We got to get it right. So the first two things, the week that the ARP passed, that we were thinking about from the county level at the association, and I think many of our members, to your question, was like, well, we better start planning. We have to be very strategic about this once in a generation opportunity. The second thing that came to our mind was compliance, because federal money just doesn't come down without some strings attached. And so $2 billion coming into county budgets around the state is going to have a significant amount of compliance strings attached to it. And so, as Representative Arp indicated, we have some units of government in the state of North Carolina that may or may not have the full capacity to handle that type of compliance issue. So we as an association and we as partners with the state and counties need to be thinking about not only the strategic planning process to use this so wisely, this once in a generation opportunity, but we also have to look at the back end in terms of making sure that we do it correctly and account for it correctly. And so we've been having conversations with the state treasurer and the state auditor and state leaders about those things as well. So I don't know if that answered your specific question, but I really want to delve into some of the plans that Representative Arp talked about, broadband and wastewater, and talk about those further. But I'll wait to hear from you about which direction you want to go first.
Yeah, well, let's talk just a little bit. You talked about compliance, and I think Paige has been looking at that a lot. And it's not like the money is flowing and you can use it for whatever you want to, or you can, you don't have to tell anybody what you're doing. There's just a small amount of money that we've been helping the state deploy through the Institute for Emerging Issues to counties to help with some emergency broadband challenges. And we've become firsthand acquainted with the compliance issues that there are for accounting for that funding. But Paige, could you talk a little bit about what the intended uses of at least the major ARP money are? And we'll put up a slide that gives people a little bit of an indication of what those categories are.
Sure, Leslie. I think that's such an important context for all of this, because you put up the slide with the very large amounts at the beginning, but like you said, it's not just open-ended money. So it definitely comes with rules around it for those state and local fiscal recovery funds. The Department of Treasury, which is also the agency that oversaw the Coronavirus Relief Fund, which was part of the CARES Act, they have interpreted and implemented how these rules are going to work. So the reason that we're focused so much on water, wastewater, and broadband is because those are some of the eligible uses for these funds. So, one of the first things I would say from a county commissioner and county staff perspective when they heard about this funding is they went right to the rules because, they want to make sure that when they're reporting back to Treasury, which everyone is now required to do, that they're complying. And, when they have audits and they have all of these requirements that they have to fulfill, that they've used their money in an eligible way. So in addition to the broadband, water, and wastewater, one of the big focuses of Treasury is truly recovering from the pandemic. So you can see that, there's definitely a continuing support of public health response. So much like CARES Act money was used for public health purposes, these funds are really intended to go towards helping the economic impacts of the pandemic. So how do you help individuals? How do you help businesses? How do you help nonprofits? So those are some of the top intended uses. Also, if the government lost revenue, there were some governments that lost revenue over the past year, and that's an eligible use. To the extent that you lost revenue, you're allowed to utilize these funds to pay for certain government services, and then to provide an additional amount of pay to some of your essential workers, those that were truly critical and interfaced with the public. Those are also eligible uses. So I think that, this has definitely been the focus of a lot of county staff and county commissioners to say, okay, how do we balance planning and coordinating and strategy with figuring out, do we need to get some of these funds out quickly? Do we need to get some of these funds to most react to some of the economic impacts? One of the fortunate things I think that is working in state and local government's favor on these funds is that they do have a longer time period to spend. Last year, when the CARES Act was passed, there was a very short time limit for that CRF to be spent. And so not only were local governments trying to get up to speed with the rules and the reporting and everything, but they had to determine how they were going to spend it. So with this funding, there is a longer amount of time, so local governments can take that time to balance, the immediate needs with the desire to plan more long term.
Representative, one of the interesting situations North Carolina finds itself in is that in terms of the state budget, we're in a very strong position. And part of it is because of the lack of ability to agree on the past couple of budgets. But also North Carolina's come through this stronger than we expected. And by some accounts, counties have come through it stronger than everyone expected. One of the thoughts going into this was it was going to devastate economies, and absolutely it has had huge negative effects. But in terms of absolute funding that's available to work with, there is a lot to work with. And I wonder if you could just talk about how you're balancing revenue that the state has, that it generates itself, and what that is to be used for versus this one-time federal money that's coming down.
That's a great point, Leslie. Is that I remember sitting in the room back March of 20 and getting the revenue pictures in, and everybody thought, in fact, at the end of the year, the state has to close the books, balance the books, if you will. We're not like the deficit spending like the federal government do. We have to close the books, and we spent many hours and hours and days sweeping the corners because we thought we were going to have an over $600 million shortfall to close the books. And so we swept every corner of the state budget to cash balances, fund balances, to try and not cut programs, but yet balance the books for the end of the year. We were able to do that. And then lo and behold, come February, we had a $4 billion over collections report that was updated here last week with an additional $1.9 billion. So all total, we've had from projections a $6 billion over collections and revenue. And that's due to the recovery. Many businesses, although not everyone has shared in that recovery. And what I will tell you is, from where I see, the nature of North Carolina is different. When you have the pandemic slam into the economy of the nation the way it has, we will move forward differently than where we were. It won't be back the way it was. It'll be different. I will tell you that the nature of businesses and how they had to restructure to survive the pandemic will continue forward and inform the way they're set up. The recession back in 2007 significantly changed. I'm in the construction industry. It significantly changed the way the construction industry operates. And so no different from there is that the economy in North Carolina, the businesses are going to be significantly different moving forward. I say all that to say is our goal is to not get us necessarily back doing the same things that we had done prior to the pandemic, but recognize the new trajectory, the new businesses, the new economies that are developing, the ways people work, and understand that trajectory, and then strategize and plan for the future where we're going. And that is what is difficult, because the nature of work, the nature of the way businesses, the delivery of services from the counties to its constituents, everything has been shaken and reformed going forward. We believe that this tremendous opportunity gives this great revenue numbers, albeit one-time money, gives us significant areas that we can focus in: capital, infrastructure, and really position ourselves to springboard in this new direction, this new bent that North Carolina is going.
You're almost making that sound easy, and it sounds crazy complicated. Kevin, so counties are just recovering. They're picking up the pieces of this past year that's been strange. In many cases, folks are just coming back into work. Schools are just coming back into session. And you have this opportunity to do this transformative thinking that Representative Arp is thinking about, but you've also got to turn the lights back on, make sure everybody's okay. Many people have suffered from grief. There's this trough of money that's coming in, and there's not necessarily a whole lot of additional infrastructure that comes with it to handle the compliance and other things. How does this conversation happen between local government and state government in a way that is thoughtful so that it really can be the kind of transformative that Representative Arp is talking about?
Well, I would answer that this way, Leslie. I think I'm biased, but I'm pretty sure that North Carolina is always at the front of the pack in terms of our ability to rally and coordinate. And you saw that with the CARES Act funding when it started. And there was an effort in the governor's office that was accepted and supported by the assembly as well, by establishing an office called the NC Pro Office, which is the Pandemic Response Office. And so there was significant coordination at the state level with the local governments, the counties and the cities. And that office still exists. Now, ARP funding is a bit different. As Paige pointed out, it's got a different time frame. Which is great because that gives us more time. Now, as an aside, I would say that when you're talking about broadband, you've only got 5 to 6 years. And so time is relative. So we've got to get fiber in the ground, and that takes time, especially with labor and material shortages that are facing us. So that's just an aside comment. But the NC Pro office is there. However, this funding that's coming directly to counties, and it's not coming through the state like the CARES Act did. The state gets its own, as you showed in the slide, $5.3 billion and 2.0 and 1.46 ish billion to the cities. So that gets a new flavor of coordination right now that I feel happy to tell you that we're working together with the state leaders, the assembly, and the governor's office and agencies with our counterparts at the cities to try to coordinate the best that we can. It's still a work in progress because the U.S. Treasury guidance didn't come out until May. It took a lot longer for that Treasury guidance to come out. So people are still sifting through and trying to read the tea leaves on that. Our members are waiting for the assembly to finish their budget process because, largely the ideas that are coming through Representative Arp and other state leaders to match and incent those state dollars to amplify work on broadband and housing and water and sewer. We're not going to know the answer to that until the budget process is over. That's why it's so critically important for that to get done quickly so we can start moving fast to work on these broadband projects. So to summarize, Leslie, to your answer is I'm very optimistic about North Carolina's ability to always pull together at all levels of government to work together and move forward. It's just the culture of what we do in North Carolina. And I feel very strongly about that and positive.
Yeah, we're showing a picture from the Pandemic Recovery Office website, which has a county by county breakout of exactly what kind of funding is coming down. And you can just sort of click on your county if you want to there and pull up and get a sense of how much is coming in your direction, no matter which county in North Carolina you live in. Paige, you've also done a website at the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners that is also an information site for people to sort through. Can you talk a little bit about what's on there? Sure.
So as soon as the Treasury guidance came down, which is what Kevin just mentioned, everybody started reading that, and it's really important because it outlines, how these funds can be spent, some of the rules around it, and some of the requirements that recipients, which is the state of North Carolina and all the local governments, what they're going to have to start reporting. So they'll have to report back to the federal government on how they spent their funds. But some of the other things that are really important for counties to know about is how these other streams of funding from the American Rescue Plan could impact the decisions on how they spend their fiscal recovery funds. So, you had that slide on education funding and funding that's coming directly to businesses. And so when a county is making decisions to plan for and maximize its fiscal recovery funds, what else may be going to that community? So trying to highlight those other funds as well as ways that a county might want to spend some of its funds. Our past president at the association, his initiative was food security. And so one of the purposes and one of the allowable uses of this money is to help with food security. A large portion of funding in the Senate budget that was just released yesterday could potentially go to food banks. Again, this isn't the final budget, but I mean, that's definitely a focus area that a lot of people are looking at because there was a lot of economic impact there, and that would be an ideal use of the funds. And then we've also tried to highlight how counties are planning to spend for this money. So are they holding public information sessions? Are they collecting feedback from the community? I mean, this is truly a historic investment. So one of the things that a lot of local governments do is they interact with their community. I would say all local governments do that, and they determine, how do our residents feel that this money would be best spent. So they could collect that information and then determine within the eligible uses some of what may work best for their community. So we've tried to collect just a variety of information as well as some FAQs and top highlights.
One other potential coordination that could happen is that North Carolina has these 16 regional councils of government that bring together multiple counties, generally in a geographic region that are generally in conversation with each other. Kevin, can you talk a little bit about the role that the councils of government might be able to play in synthesizing and coordinating?
Leslie, thanks for that question. Yes. So the COGs, the councils of governments, have long been established in North Carolina and across the country, but in North Carolina, they played a unique role in providing technical assistance to smaller units of government. And as we have been having these conversations about this coordination, this is not only an opportunity to invest in the big infrastructure projects like broadband, water, sewer, et cetera. This is also an opportunity to have all boats rise, in the sense that there are struggling units of government out there that are very small in nature, and they could use some technical assistance. The Council of Governments provide that type of assistance, I would say more so than the association does, or the League of Municipalities. The School of Government is also a player in that field, and we should all be working together at this time to have the conversations, to spur the conversations about strategic planning for regional planning, for county planning, city planning, so the COGS can play that role. And so there is funding in the Senate budget and in the governor's plan that would assist these groups, these associations in the COGS, to help provide that technical assistance. And I think it would be a good investment for the future of North Carolina to do that. One final comment on that, Leslie, and that is that, and again, I'm biased, but I love our counties, I love our state. I've always found that with our members, they are some of the most innovative groups of people, if they have the flexibility of the use of the funds to come up with answers to problems that are hard. And I always say, if you put a county manager and a group of dedicated and thoughtful county commissioners on a really complex problem, they're going to figure it out, because they have to. They're the practitioners of government, and they've got to figure it out at the end of the day. So if we can sort of incentivize them to come up with some unique challenges to these problems, I have a sense that we can do it, and we can do it well.
Let me open things up now to everyone who's listening and ask that you submit your questions. If you are working in local government and you can give us a view from the ground about what your life is like right now, we'd love to hear from you. If you have a question about eligible uses, if you have a question about where state government dollars should be going, and you have a chance to talk to Representative Arp, he's still got a budget to figure out. So please submit your questions, and we'll be glad to get to as many of them as we can. Let me just maybe ask you guys to look forward a little bit and imagine that this goes as well as we all hope it does. What's going to be different in North Carolina 5 years from now, from where we were possibly pre-pandemic or where we are right now? What's going to be different and better about North Carolina in 5 years if we do this right?
Take a shot at that. Our vision is that we have invested in the right tools to see prosperity. We are trying to anticipate the new economy. We've had tremendous success in terms of the environment. People like North Carolina. People are moving to North Carolina. Businesses are moving to North Carolina because they love the quality of life, and they can get a job. They can do wonderful things. And what we want to do is provide those investments that continue that vision. Quite frankly, they love the counties and the municipalities, the communities, and that's why they're coming here. We're getting a whole new seat in Congress because we've grown so much, and if we do it right, we will continue to grow. The key is not what the state is doing. It's the key is the counties where these people live, these businesses thrive, and it's a very symbiotic relationship with the county and state, with the local partners there. So,
Kevin, what's going to be different in 5 years if we do this right?
No, that's a hope. But I want to come back to something that someone else said, that I think it was Paige. Everyone hasn't recovered equally out of this pandemic, and nor will they. And I think that's really important for us to understand. Just because we're throwing a significant amount of one-time money at a lot of big problems doesn't mean that every part and every county of our state, every 100 of our counties are going to recover equally. And so we have to be very mindful about that, and mindful about how we take care of some of those counties that may not be seeing the prosperous effects of some of these funds. And we have to be very purposeful in putting in infrastructure. And again, I'm really focusing on broadband because it's our number one legislative priority. But I think we've seen through this pandemic that connectivity is so critically important, just in every aspect of most things: healthcare, telemedicine, education, and commerce. And now we've discovered that we can, if we have connectivity, we can go anywhere and work. And so some of these communities that basically people were leaving and their populations were diminishing, and they're beautiful counties, they have beautiful natural resources, they may have an opportunity to change their entire viewpoint on how they market themselves if they have the ability to put the right infrastructure in place. Because they could bring in many new people from all over the country to live in some of these more rural communities and have the opportunity to do their work from there. And so I see great promise in our future if we make these key investments correctly and we think that way, that we could really transform all parts of our state. And I'm excited about that.
I think broadband on some level is an end in itself, but it's almost more important as a means to an end. All those different elements that you just hit on, Kevin. And Representative Arp, I know it's an issue close to your heart and something you've been working on. What if we do this right? What does broadband connectivity look like, and what do broadband subscription rates look like in 5 years? Are we going to be able to get to every hoot and holler of every county and every part of the state? And are people going to be buying this technology and using it?
Technology continues to change and improve and reach everybody. Right now, broadband are the roadways and the byways of the air. And just as we papered North Carolina with great transportation systems and trying to keep up with that, and that has spurred the economic development in the counties and in the state. Broadband is the new highways, and we have to look at it. I certainly look at it as an essential structure. When the proposal that I put forward for this, unprecedented broadband plan and the great expansion plan that we just put forward, we put $750 million with the partnerships. It'll leverage over $1.3 billion worth of investment. We wanted to make that investment technology neutral as much as we can, of course, complying with the feds, because there are new technologies that are just busting on the scene, waiting to really completely transform. And that's the new economy that I was talking about. I'm being an engineer working in the construction industry. I'm licensed in 40 states, so we do stuff all over the country. And broadband is essential to our business as the phone lines, as electricity, and it is that imperative to hear. In education and health, as Kevin was talking about, is transforming these communities where people have a different and better quality of life in some of these communities and not have to live in the cities and the towns that are traditionally associated with the economic hubs. And so that's what's amazing. We got companies coming to North Carolina because of that potential and innovation and technology. Our efforts in broadband will sustain that and pave the road for the future growth. That's the new economy.
Can you talk a little bit about how this partnership is going to work on broadband? Because the GREAT program is a provider forward program, but the donut hole, the CAB program, the completing access to broadband, is really saying, counties, you know where the donut holes are and where that. So how's that going to work, and how do you ensure that the federal RDOC program and the GREAT program and the CAB program all end up resulting in more and more and more people getting access to broadband?
But we've gotten a nationally recognized program in the GREAT, where it's provider led. They still partner with local communities and the state to provide that resources to extend broadband coverage. Really, it's not about reducing rates right now. These funds are about putting infrastructure in place so that people can access broadband. All right. Now, coupled with that is a totally federally run RDOF program. And so you've got zones in the state where they have blocked off areas and are providing that funding 100%. And so the thing that we don't want to do is make those areas ineligible because of something that we do. We lose that 100% funding. So that's important in terms of total dollars coming into North Carolina for broadband. And so what we found was in between these areas are the vast part of North Carolina, and that's where the CAB program, the Completing Access to Broadband. The county will lead this effort, put out RFPs, and match at varying levels their initiative of where to put infrastructure in place for their community to access broadband. The state has put together a plan that if they choose to participate, we would put significant match monies and extend the vision for the counties in areas that they know, that where their economic emphasis are, where their constituent concerns are, all of that from a local perspective. And so the significant part about the CAB program is that it is county led. They put out proposals, receive bids or whatever requests. It's evaluated, and when it complies with the state program, the state matches that, and it's a tremendous effort. And so from all three efforts, we hope to leverage and bring over $1.3 billion worth of investment. I don't know of another state with such a significant comprehensive plan. We've built on the great work and partnerships with the broadband office in the state, who's charged with coordinating these. And the whole point of it is to bring economic and quality of life to our communities and counties.
Paige, a lot of this is technical. A lot of this is compliance focused, or at least there's going to be a huge compliance component of it. How are you helping to get the word out so that people know how to apply for a CAB, but how to apply for all of this money? There have been some anecdotal stories I've heard of places that early on weren't even sure which person was supposed to sign up to be the eligible municipal level entity that would be the official receiver of money of record. So how are you getting that word out and getting the education to the people to help them figure out their role in coordinating all these funds?
Yeah, it's so important, Leslie. From the association perspective, we're doing as much email outreach as we can. We have the website resources. We've put on several webinars for the membership. I think one of the really vital things in all of this is there is this very large stakeholder group of a lot of local government focused organizations, the League of Municipalities, the COGS, the School of Government, There's a lot of state agencies, including the Pro Office, the Broadband Office, DEQ. They're all really focused on making sure local governments are successful with this money. So they have, there are multiple meetings. They're planning these kind of individual or regional training sessions. There's going to be a lot of assistance from the local government commission in terms of compliance. It very much is, everyone is very focused on trying to get as much information as possible. I see our role at the association as trying to highlight and bring the most significant and important and timely pieces to the membership, because it can be overwhelming, honestly, in terms of the information that's coming out. So things like, making sure you know where to apply for the funds. The Pro Office did a lot of work for some of the smaller local governments who might have had a question about who should apply, and what kind of resolution do we need to do, and what do we need to do for our budget amendment, trying to make them feel comfortable and make sure that there's that assistance there. So I think that if there is this technical assistance opportunity going forward, I could see the association and the league and the COGS as well kind of expanding that. And again, it's really just going to take a huge coalition of partners who are really invested in the success of local governments.
Resource slides that we showed earlier. First is the one that the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners has put together that kind of summarizes the overall resources that are available. And that's ncacc.org/ARP. And then the other is the North Carolina Pandemic Recovery Office that is also has a, as I mentioned earlier, county by county drop-down menu that really tries to assess the exact amount of funding that's coming to each county. You can see that here that according to this website, Union County has something on the order of $413 million coming its way that it needs to find ways to meaningfully leverage. So those are two really important resources that I think are going to be helpful to folks. Let me just close with a little bit of a lightning round, fill in the blank, starting with you, Representative Arp. Fill in the blank. If North Carolina does not come out stronger at the end of investing this money, ... fill in the blank.
It failed miserably. I think we have unprecedented times, like Kevin said, to put one-time money into the infrastructure that leverages the next platform to build from. And that's where our opportunities are. So we're forward thinking. Even in the CAP program, we've provided assistance to small counties to ensure that everybody has the resources to be forward projecting.
The greatest this is another fill in the blank. The greatest opportunity for counties with this stimulus funding is blank. I think you're muted, or maybe intentionally muted.
Yeah, and that was the amazing answer that I just gave. No, so the question was, what is our greatest opportunity?
Yes.
I think, just to revisit some of the things said earlier, that this could be highly transformational in all of these areas, in infrastructure, to really make parts of our state, our counties that have traditionally struggled, thrive. So a lot of opportunity in those areas. I'll just leave it at that.
The nature of the money makes sure that we can only pursue solutions that are one-time money. That's what is somehow constricting. If this was recurring dollars, we would be looking at programs and people. The nature of the money constrains us to only certain solutions and visions to where this is plays. I think that's a key thing to remember too.
If I can build off that, I completely agree. And going back to counties being creative, they could be creative in creating solutions that live longer. One thing we didn't really touch on was mental health and substance abuse, which touches county governments and state governments, our state government, but really at the county level. We didn't touch upon that. And I think that we're going to have to figure out unique and creative ways to tackle those issues coming out of this pandemic to make that live as long as we can in response to the mental health challenges and substance abuse challenges that are going to be heightened out of this. So that's another show, Leslie, but it's a big issue.
Yeah, latest figures from CDC show serious mental health illnesses tripling during the pandemic. Just huge changes, and it is another show. Thank you for that idea. Paige, number one thing county commissioners need to pay attention to as they try to help sort through how to use this one-time funding that we've been talking about?
I would just say strategy. I think, staying cool, calm, and collected. There's definitely a desire to rush and spend and respond to everything that's coming in. But to the extent you can effectuate that balance and try to keep a reasonable approach, I think it's going to be more impactful. And like you said, 5 years from now, you'll probably be more pleased with the decisions that you made.
All right. Thank you, Paige Worsham, Kevin Leonard, Representative Dean Arp. Thank you all for being with us and for the work that you're doing on this. There is, on some level, nothing glamorous about the blocking and tackling that goes into figuring out how to appropriate funding. But as all of you have mentioned, this could truly be transformative for North Carolina if we are able to get it right. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you.
All right. Well, that's our show for today. If you liked it, please share it with a friend, either the audio on our website, emergingissues.org, or on the IEI YouTube channel. You can find all that information on emergingissues.org under media. Hope you'll join us next time for another Emerging Issues on First and Future Live. Our next program is Tuesday, July 6th from 9 to 10 a.m. The topic is going to be summer reading, how reading about the past can help us shape our state's future. We'll have a discussion of some books that should be on your summer reading list. First and Future, as you've seen, is produced by James Herrick with senior leadership from Greg Hedgepeth and program support from Kirsten Chang. We had help today on research from Simone Coleman and for slides from Renee Potts. I'm Leslie Boney. Thank you for listening. We'll see you in the future.